Today is February 26, 2025, and this is the regular meeting of the Public Safety Communications Task Force. My name is Jennifer Morrison. I'm one of the co-chairs. And just so that everyone is aware, this meeting is being recorded, and a recording of this meeting will be available on our website at some point after the meeting. We are going to start with a roll call. If you could please let me know verbally that you are here when I call your name. Paul White.
I'm here.
Mike Donges. Taking that as a no. Michael Wright.
I'm here.
Jim Mack.
Here.
Ron Kumets.
I am here.
Barb Neal. I think Barb might be joining us later. Did I forget anyone? Mike's? No, I got everybody. All right, sounds like we have a quorum and we can proceed with the agenda. But before we get into the agenda, do any of the task force members have proposed changes to the agenda?
None here.
Okay, hearing none, we can proceed with the agenda as it was published, which I don't have in front of me. So Emily, would you like to tell me what's next on the agenda?
Approval of minutes
Fantastic. Which minutes are we looking to approve? The ones that were just circulated?
from 2/12, regular meeting number 44.
Wow, 44.
Yeah.
Okay, next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the February 12th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve these meetings?
I will make a motion to approve those minutes.
Seconded.
Okay, it has been approved and seconded. Is there any discussion of the minutes before we take a vote? Hearing none. All those in favor of approval of the February 12th minutes, please raise your hand or say aye. And I'll say aye.
Aye.
Very good. The minutes are passed. I am going to assume that public comment is next. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
It is.
Okay, Paul, could you spearhead this portion while I transition from the car to the office, and I will keep you in my ears as I go.
Sure. So I don't see any members of the general. Yes, I do. I got to go to page 2. Yep. There, I was only seeing one page, but there is a second page of attendees. So I see Kim Cheney twice, actually. I see Irene Renner. Are there any, before I let people speak, are there any other? I don't recognize a couple of names here. I don't recognize Tom Andrus or Louisa Lake. Are you?
Louisa
Lake. Go ahead, Bonnie.
I said Louisa's with MCP.
Okay, I thought that might be the case. And Tom?
Hi, this is Tom Andros. I am public and I don't have anything. Thank you.
No comments? Okay, thank you for joining us. Could you just tell us, are you just an interested person or do you represent some particular entity?
Yes, I am a consultant now in New Hampshire and a subcontractor for a consultant working for Southwest Fire Mutual Aid.
Okay, very good. Thank you for joining us. So that leaves Kim Cheney and Irene Renner. Good morning. Thanks for joining us. Irene, do you have any comments for us today?
Hi, no, I'm just here to listen. Thanks so much.
Very good. Thank you for joining us. And Kim.
Hi. I've been thinking about the governance problem. I'm reminded that when I was chair of the Central Vermont Public Safety Authority, first responders regarded sitting on that authority as a conflict of interest, or at least they so expressed. I think they meant since the authority had its own budget, any money that went to it was unavailable to the general resources of the towns that were members. So if you're a police chief in Barry and you vote for the budget of the authority, it's a conflict with your employer.
Sure.
And I had not beat that drum recently, but it is a real problem if you form a governance proposal where first responders are on the board and are feeling a conflict. I don't think it is an actual conflict, but that's what they expressed. So it's either a real conflict or simply a feeling that the governance was inappropriate. I think that's going to take some real thinking, how you do the governance.
Sure. Okay. Okay. Is that all you had for us this morning?
That was my kernel of wisdom that I
Okay.
can drop once a month.
All right. Well, we'll take it. Thank you for sharing that. And I see another attendee joined us. It just is labeled as audience, no name. So I'm not sure who that is. Could you just identify yourself and indicate whether or not you have public comments or if you're just here to listen? Are there any members of anybody not affiliated with the task force or MCP or Televate currently on the call that wishes to make public comment? There is one user who doesn't have a name showing. I'm not sure who it is. It's just labeled as audience. Well, hearing none, going once, going twice, I'll say that I guess we have accepted public comment. And we can continue with the next item on the agenda, which is project updates. And I guess, Dom, are you taking care of that for Televate?
Yes, we'll be happy to go ahead and do that. We have had a lot of activity, certainly over the last couple of weeks. We compiled the complete set of comments from the initial draft of the system planning document, had provided those to MCP. MCP incorporated, addressed those comments, and produced a second working document, I should say, of the system planning document, which was made available last week on Friday. We are currently in a quick review of that document, trying to identify any specific comments that need to be addressed prior to providing a draft for public comment, which we hope to have complete by the end of this week. That's a primary activity we've had ongoing. We also, MCP had also completed the update to the system inventory and assessment document, and that was provided to the task force. That is currently being reviewed for necessary redactions before that is made available to the public. In anticipation of public release of the system planning document draft, we are scheduling workshops, both workshops and listening sessions. The workshops will be for specific invited stakeholders. We have 3 of those scheduled for the week of March 10th, and there will be 2 public feedback sessions, I guess I'll call them, the next week, the week of March 17th. Those are currently being scheduled as well. There will be links sent out shortly with a landing page where interested people can sign up to participate in those sessions. Also, we have the last system planning workshop that we are working to schedule. That would be addressing the financial considerations, and that have been tentatively set for March 17th. We have sent out requests to the invited attendees, have received some, although we are leaving that open for a few more days to determine if a significant portion of those people who we've invited will be able to attend. If not, we may have to look at an alternative date. But right now, we're hoping to have that take place on the 17th. And I will note, maybe this is best for new business, but the second draft of the system planning document had significant updates to it, and a significant section addressing the recommendations for regionalization. And I would recommend that we take some time on this call with all task force members to review that. I think it's very critical that MCP has a chance to explain and review that content to the task force members as they look to do their review of this updated document. And that's what I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Don. On behalf of MCP, Bonnie, or who is there any further update?
I don't believe we have any further updates at this point.
Bonnie, can we just remind the task force members what the date that you proposed to transmit the public draft to us is? Because once you tell me what the date is to get it to us, then I have to get it to our public records team for any redactions, and then we can distribute it publicly. So what date are you transmitting that to us?
Dom, do you have that?
We are planning for Friday. We're shooting for Friday. We have
That's
comments. We have comments that we have been compiling on the second draft. We are identifying those that would be marked as critical, if you will, that need to be addressed prior to making a public draft. There are certainly other comments that can be addressed during the public review period. But we have the critical ones, which we anticipate will be limited and will be hopefully a short turnaround by MCP so we can have the document on Friday.
Okay, and assuming that I can get it to my team by the beginning of the business day on Monday, I need to remind people that Tuesday's a holiday. So it will take a couple days for my team to get through that draft to then release it to the public. As soon as we release that draft and post it on our website and distribute it through all the channels that we've been trying to push comms to, then we will send out the invitations to the listening sessions for the first responder community and elected officials. And then probably wait another week and do the press releases, etc., related to the public listening sessions. So we have a plan, but it all falls into place once we can actually push that report out publicly.
Yes.
All right, Paul, thanks for driving for me. I'm back. The next item on the agenda is executive session if needed. Does anyone know of any reason why we would need to go into executive session?
No.
Yeah, I'm not aware of anything. So we'll move to new business, which I think, Dom, is where we're going to talk about the section that you spoke of, and then the
there was another section that I thought we could benefit from a conversation with our task force members related to, and I'm sorry that I don't have the document open in front of me, but there was a specific section that relates to assumptions in the report, which are tied deeply to cost estimates. And it was about the number of radios for law enforcement, EMS, and fire. And I had concerns on both the first version of the working draft and the second version of the working draft that the numbers were not correct for law enforcement. In fact, they were, I thought, very far off in terms of the number of state officers. So I just wanted to know if, and perhaps we could pull up on the second version of the working document, if we could pull up that one section and talk about those numbers, because I think that getting those right, as and not necessarily right 100% to the ones or even the tens accurate before we release it publicly is important, because there's big numbers attached to that when you talk about, you know, $4,000 or $5,000 per portable radio or mobile radio. Being off by 20 or 50 or 100 or 500 is a lot of money.
I can pull that up, Jen. I'm looking for that section,
Okay.
and then I can share my screen.
Yeah, that would be great.
Hey, Tom, it's on page 71 of the wireless
Right.
section.
And unfortunately, we do not have Scott Neal on here. I'm going to reach out to him right now. See if he can join.
Okay. Should we address the other piece first then, Bonnie, in case we get
Let's
Scott?
do that. Let's do
Okay.
that.
All right. I can, again, share my screen. I'm going to scroll back to the other portion I wanted to discuss. And just about there. Okay, hopefully everyone can see my screen now. This is right now on page 98 of the document, where there a section begins of the regionalization recommendations. This is a piece that I felt was, very substantial additional content that was added for this draft, and thought it would be very helpful to review. I will certainly, Bonnie, if you could tell me where best to proceed as you go through the description, happy to do that.
So you want an overview of the recommendation first, and then we can follow up with any questions that you have. Is that correct?
Yes, and certainly the table that's 3 or 4 pages into this section, I would like some detailed explanation of that as well.
Okay, which table? Because there's a couple of tables in that section.
All right, it is this one here.
That one there. Okay. All right.
Yep.
So I'm gonna let Jason explain the narrative of this recommendation, and he's going to be supported by Louisa on the calculations. I believe that it goes along with the staffing and that table that you just showed. So Jason, do you want to pick up with an overview of this recommendation?
Sure. Excuse me. So looking through the 4 recommendations, the end state that we felt would be best serving the citizens would be the option 4, having the 6 regional PSAPs and having the dispatch centers regionalized into one of those 6 PSAPs. The numbers, as we go through the numbers, and that's that table, I believe it's page 102 that you referred to, Dom.
Yes.
Those are the numbers that we looked at. And essentially there were two ways that you could take the dispatch centers that exist today and regionalize those with the PSAPs. Before we get into that, in conversation, we felt that there were two dispatch centers that had unique enough operations as to keep those in their current state. One being University of Vermont Police Department, because of the security aspect, the limited on campus presence and response, etc. We felt that it was appropriate to keep University of Vermont as is. And then also Mad River Valley Ambulance, since they are currently 100% handling their dispatches with volunteers. We felt that that was also appropriate to keep as is. We do have narrative in that piece where we explain about Mad River Valley. We do have narrative in there, as you see, if in the future they feel they cannot handle their dispatch operations anymore, then that would require further study down the line. Looking at current call volumes, incidents, personnel, all the different factors that come into that. So from there, we discussed, okay, how do you determine which dispatch center regionalizes into which PSAP? And there were two ways that we felt would be appropriate in this instance. One, you could take the existing PSAP catchment area, the 911 catchment area, and just simply collect the names of the dispatch centers in each catchment area, and those would be the dispatch centers that would regionalize with that PSAP. As is pointed out in the narrative,
is that 4A? I'm
yes,
sorry.
that's 4A.
Okay.
As is pointed out there, just prior to that, we do show the centers that have the ability to expand. As you see, St. Albans, Westminster, and Williston do not have the ability to expand. They don't have the ability to significantly to add any additional consoles. And Hartford has one. Lamoille County and Shelburne didn't specify exactly how much, but based on their responses to the original questionnaire, it was inferred that they would be able to add one or more consoles to their respective operations. So looking at the option 4A, just taking the catchment areas and regionalizing based on that. Based on the numbers, Williston would not be able to handle the existing volume. And just to point out also, both of the 4A and 4B options do pull all of the current out of state dispatching back into the state. So looking at the numbers, it was determined that Williston would not be able to sustain that type of addition. So from there, we employed the assistance of our GIS folks here at MCP to look at option 4B, which is regionalizing strictly based on geography. So which dispatch, looking at dispatch center A, who are they closest to as far as a PSAP? So for example, here you see Woodstock is closest to Hartford today, and that is where they would stay. However, Randolph, today they're part of the Westminster catchment area. They're part of the Westminster, Westminster takes their calls today. However, geographically, they are closer to Hartford. So in option 4B, their dispatch operations would move over to Hartford. And we did that for all of the dispatch centers with one exception, and that is Burleson. Burleson is currently handled within Williston, and we felt it was appropriate to keep them there. And when you run the numbers, which is the table on page 102, that actually keeping Burlington with Williston actually balances out the numbers. One thing that did pop out to us, St. Albans in both options does not take on anyone additional. So the operation at St. Albans moving forward in both options would remain as it is today. So then if you scroll down to the table, or actually the map is here. We're actually going to move this to the appendices, but for right now, for sake of conversation, it does show how those areas would adjust, based on the closest dispatch center with the closest PSAP philosophy. So scrolling down to the table, then on page 102, looking at the numbers, we do show, who the number of dispatch centers that are currently handled by each existing PSAP. And with option 4B, how many additional agencies, based on what was reported to us from the questionnaire and the inventory, how many additional agencies would that PSAP now be responsible for? Those look like large numbers, but that's only telling part of the story. If you look at the total number of calls that are being dispatched, incidents that are being dispatched per hour, those numbers tell the true story. So for example, Lamoille County would be gaining just over, even though they're getting in this proposal 74 additional agencies to dispatch for, they would only be gaining approximately a call and a half. You could round it up to 2 calls per hour. So there would potentially need to be some creative rearrangement of the graphical display on the radio consoles, to potentially move some of the agencies around within the PSAP, which agency is dispatched from which physical workstation, furniture position, if you look at it from a furniture perspective. But as a whole, there would only be that 1.65 additional calls, and then total of the dispatch would be 6.46 or 7 calls per hour. And same thing with Westminster. There would be just over 7 calls per hour, but because Westminster would be, I believe it's that one agency that would be moving over, you can see that there's actually a slight decrease in the 911 calls with the increase for the incidents per hour. Louisa, did you want to expand on that at all?
Oh, hold on, Jason. Paul has his hand up.
Oh, sorry about that. Yes, sir.
No, that's okay. So looking at this table that's on the screen right now, the very first line, Hartford, I had a question about that. It's showing 57 additional agencies coming in, but if I remember from looking at it, it looked like Hartford was only going to be taking over Rutland City, which doesn't do much dispatching, Randolph, which does no dispatching, and Woodstock, which dispatches for 3 or 4 agencies. So I'm wondering, that 57 additional agencies, does that include taking agencies in that are currently dispatched by an out-of-state entity.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
That is correct. Yeah, like as I said, both option 4A and option 4B eliminates all of the out-of-state dispatching and brings all of those agencies into operations within the state.
Thank you.
And no, Bonnie, I don't have anything to add. I think, Jason's spot on with that. And it's the number of agencies that each of the dispatch centers have, and some of their call volume or incident volume is extremely low. So, obviously, as Jason's pointed out here, there's some concern with how they're dispatched and how many total agencies would be on a singular talk group. But I believe, Jason, you've caveated that as well.
And I would actually add to this is because in doing the math, because some people, you may look and you go, oh, I'm going to add, 56,000, incidents. And it seems like a tremendous amount. But when how Louisa and Jason figured this out, there are 8,760 hours in a year. So when you do the math there, that number significantly reduces down. And as they did the math, that's 6 incidents per hour. And I don't think you mentioned, Jason, too, that this is a combined incident volume, police, fire, and EMS. And traditionally, if you break down the percentage of how many incidents are police, how many are fire and EMS, you could even break that down further, that would probably be maybe 3 calls for police and 2 calls for fire, or 2 for EMS and 1 for fire, right? So that even breaks it down even further of what an individual telecommunicator or dispatcher would be responsible for.
And you're correct, Bonnie. And I think that also goes back to their operational configuration that would have to, be looked at when agencies would be brought onto the PSAPs to ensure that, one dispatcher is not responsible for law, fire, and EMS. So their operational configuration and what they dispatch per each workstation, as Jason mentioned, will be important.
Dom?
Yes, I have a question. Thanks, Bonnie. Trying to make sure I understand this table. I'm assuming this number, is this correct, or should this be the -171 as well?
It should be a negative. They're
Okay.
losing those calls.
Okay. So then
that's a typo.
Right. So can you explain if Williston, for example, is getting, so they're receiving fewer 911 calls, there are fewer incoming calls, is that what you're saying? But their added incident volume greatly increases. How exactly does that happen? Does that happen because there's more incidents that are transferred to them to dispatch? How exactly does this happen?
Jason, do you want that, or you want?
No. So again, some of that revolves around some of the out-of-state operation that's coming into the state, as well as how some of the realignment would be occurring. So when you start looking at the table above, how the different agencies are shifted, how the lines are shifting, they're picking up agencies that they weren't previously dispatching for, that they would be dispatching for today.
Well, 50 or 60,000 of that, 50 or 60,000 of that has to be Burlington, and a lot of their incidents.
Yes.
A lot of their incidents are either self-generated by the officer or they're non-emergent. They don't come through 911.
That's exactly what I was going to say is there,
Okay.
there's that big discrepancy because of self-initiations from law enforcement, traffic stops, things of that nature that really raise that. So you can't compare the 911 call volume with the incident volume, per se.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so my hand is the next one up. I just wanted to ask if the goal, if we're adding significant numbers of incidents per hour, but the goal is to not task one telecommunicator with having to handle the police, fire, and EMS side of the same incident, is that going to necessitate a fundamental shift in the way some or all of the PSAPs currently work? And by that, I mean, Paul, you'd know better, but I'm pretty sure our two PSAPs are set up by towns. So when you come to work that day, you're at the XYZ desk and you're handling everything in those towns.
Correct.
It would create a need to completely realign how the work is distributed inside our PSAPs. I'm not sure, Jim, what you do in Shelburne or what your thoughts are on that.
This would create a realignment of how we handle call volumes coming in.
So there
with
are
that
going to
many
be,
agents.
yeah, we'd have to, I'm not sure we can do it in time for this report, obviously, but we do have to have some consideration that it's not just can we handle the numbers, grow, shrink, fewer 911 calls, more incidents. This is probably going to mean that the entire way operations and workload is distributed is going to have to change in the PSAPs.
In all of the PSAPs, from the way
Yeah.
I look at it.
Correct. That would need to occur. There would potentially need to be additional full-time staff positions added. For example, Williston does not have room to grow. And Louisa, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they have two positions they're not currently using today. So in
Yes.
theory, go ahead, Louisa.
No, I was going to say you're correct. I think they have 11 or 12 positions, and they're staffing about 5 or 6 of them on average.
So there would be current workstations that would be available. And further down in the section, we do outline below the table some of the personnel impacts. And this wouldn't necessarily be just okay, you work for a dispatch center, now you don't have a job. There would be the need for positions so folks could, and for lack of a better term, I will use the term lateral. They could be a lateral hire, lateral move, whatever that process looks like at the time, based on what is allowed and what is not allowed within state law and such. But there would be that realignment that could occur as well. So even with added call volume, we're not suggesting that call volume be entirely borne on existing staff and existing workstation positions. There would be some of that operational realignment, as Jim pointed out, that would need to occur with added staff and so on. And it's for very quick calculations. One workstation position is equivalent to 6 full-time staff. So hypothetically, if you were taking 2 vacant positions, workstation furniture positions, and staffing those, that would be an additional approximately 12 full-time staff members to be able to staff those.
But I think, is it Jennifer? I think, when you were talking about the operational configuration, I think that is, that's one of the things that we don't have all the information on is what does that operational configuration look like? The number of talk groups for that each dispatcher or call taker would be responsible for, as well as the number of units that they're responsible for on a position. If you've got, for example, 12 agencies and each one only has 2 officers, that's 24, that's doable. But if they've got some like Burlington, that may require its own specific dispatch position. And so you get that operational configuration and the number of push to talks that they have that I think, Jason has mentioned in the report as well. Those are all considerations when the operational configuration is determined, if they, for whichever dispatch centers choose to regionalize.
Okay, Ron, you have your hand up.
I do have my hand up. So I'm only seeing parts of pages here, but I am looking at a map on page 108. Now that's the PDF page 108. I can't actually tell if there's a page number on this page. It's a map, a color-coded map, and I am curious if that map is showing a proposed reallocation of dispatching, or if it is presumed to be what is the existing situation right now. It's very hard to tell because Grand Isle is not separated from Franklin County by the water that is actually there, but it seems to indicate that Grand Isle County would be either dispatched by St. Albans or is being dispatched by St. Albans, and I'm curious what that actually means.
Is this the map you're referring to, Jim?
Yes, that is the map.
Okay.
So that is the proposed if PSAPs regionalized the dispatch centers that were geographically closest to that center.
One thing you need to consider with this is past experience of agencies and how they would react to this. As an officer of an agency in Grand Isle County, as well as the county mutual aid organization, I would tell you that the towns in Grand Isle County would react violently to being reallocated from the Shelburne PSAP to the St. Albans PSAP. And I think you need to be sensitive to some of that because after many years of moving about, those agencies have found a home where they are comfortable and would be very upset if they needed to change. Now, I understand that there's some dispatch centers that are not PSAPs, and my own feeling is that there shouldn't be dispatch centers that aren't PSAPs because that adds additional delays to things. But that is a concern for me and the fire agencies that I represent.
So I completely know what you're talking about, Ron, and I appreciate the sentiment. I think it's going to be impossible for our consultants to get into that type of local history and local preferences and local, the infighting and whatever. So I think that they have to make their recommendations and they have to be published. And then we as a task force and whatever successor body there is to us have to wrestle with okay, this is what makes the most sense on paper. And we have professionals who told us that. Now, how much weight do we give to exactly what you just said, the emotional side of this, the preferences side of this? And it also, at some point when we get to decision-making points, it's going to necessitate that someone explain to us what Act 78 means by don't break anything that's currently working, right? Because that is about the vaguest language out there, and it gives very little guidance. So you are correct in that that's the reaction that this recommendation will evoke. But I also think that can't be the concern of MCP. That has to be the concern of the people who have to make the decisions eventually.
I would be interested to know, based on this reallocation, how many agencies that are being dispatched by actual PSAPs now would be moved to a different PSAP under this plan or the other plan. I think those are the agencies that are much more difficult to make a case to tell them they need to do something different.
And Jason, I think you caveated in here for one that we assume that we didn't get into the agencies that are dispatched by a certain dispatch center. The assumption is that they move. And I think based on that, there are only, Jason, are there not, there are only really 3. No, there's a lot of them, most of them are moving out from a state police and going to somewhere else.
Well, you actually have Newport and St. Johnsbury going to Lamoille.
Yeah.
Both of those have dispatch centers now. They're not PSAPs, but they're dispatch centers.
Right.
And a lot of the agencies in those areas have consolidated around those 2 dispatches now.
By the way, the reason that I kind of found this map and stuff confusing was that the chart said that St. Albans PD was not going to be taking on any additional agencies, but reallocating Grand Isle to St. Albans PD would mean they'd take on 5 more agencies.
St. Albans isn't taking anybody on.
Well, it would be if the way you have it now in that map.
Right. The map is not. The map would seem to indicate that Grand Isle County would be dispatched by St. Albans PD when it is currently dispatched by Shelburne.
Is the confusion coming that the background on this map is still showing the 911 catchment areas?
I don't know. The first bit of confusion was that that Lake Champlain isn't shown accurately at the top of the map, so I was hard pressed to find Grand Isle County. But as that map is drawn that we're looking at, it would indicate that Grand Isle County would be dispatched by St. Albans, and it is not. Therefore, St. Albans would be taking on 5 more agencies.
Okay, so we've established that we need a little more clarity on Grand Isle County and where it lives and where the proposal is that it goes to.
That's right.
In the interest of time, I think we should move on to the second issue that we wanted to talk about with the group on the report.
Jen, can I say one other thing about this element?
Yeah.
And I think it speaks to what the gentleman was just saying. And that is, we do have some language in here that does suggest that something that we call an alliance profile be completed for when there is going to be a move, and to make sure that things do align around very specific criteria, not that just anybody could an agent could say, well, no, this isn't the PSAP we want to go to. We want to stay with this one instead. But that there is narrative in the recommendation to help make sure that we are not just saying, yes, you should go over here and that's the end of the story, but that there is an opportunity to say, there's some really good reasons why maybe this is not the PSAP for you to go to. Maybe that where you are is okay. You're still going into a PSAP. We're still reducing the number of dispatch centers, right? But that there is, if there is a really good reason that, you do this alliance profile and you find out that, this is not the one to go to, you really should stay where you're at, that there is that opportunity. This isn't a complete black or white recommendation.
And Bonnie, I think Grand Isle County is currently dispatched by Shelburne. And one of the assumptions that we made is that the PSAPs keep the ones that they currently have. They keep the agencies that they currently are already dispatching for, We're only talking about the dispatch centers and the agencies that they dispatch for moving as a whole. So we didn't go in and look at Grand Isle, for example, and say, where is Grand Isle going? Since Grand Isle is already dispatched by Shelburne, it stays with Shelburne. It's those agencies are currently dispatched by a dispatch center. That whole dispatch center gets absorbed. And we might need to explain that better, but that was the thought process behind it, just for Grand Isle sake.
All right, Paul?
Thank you, Louisa.
So I have a question, and then depending on the answer to that, 2 comments. Not related to the map, but related to this recommendation. If I'm reading this right, the recommendation is that all 6 PSAPs would be run by some new undefined entity that is a subdivision of the state of Vermont. Is that right? They would be, essentially, these would be state employees.
That is,
Or
I'm glad. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Bonnie.
No, go ahead, Jason. You're good. We talked about this morning.
Yeah, for option 4, that is correct. The whatever the agency would be called. So for conversation's sake, we'll just call it Division of Emergency Communications, DEC.
Okay.
Again, that's just a conversation piece at this point. That's not, anything specific. But hypothetically, yes, the end state would be that the 6 PSAPs would all be state entities under DEC. They would reside in the facility where they're at now. We've seen that type of arrangement in other places as well, where one entity is the managing body, if you will, but they are located in another facility, whether it's a sheriff's office, fire station, police department, what have you. That eliminates the need for the state to have to go into the construction business and construct 4 additional facilities where facilities currently exist. And by doing so, then the state would be able to say, these are our state requirements. And since you are a state employee, this is a state entity, these are the requirements that will be in place. And we will make sure that, for example, the training is all unilateral, it's all equal. The dispatch policies are equal, they're unilateral, it's done the exact same way. So whether you're working at Westminster this year and you move and next year you're then working in St. Albans, it would be the same from center to center.
Right. And so, not to beat the dead horse, but so you would have state employees would be embedded within the Shelburne Police Department, within the Hartford Police Department, within the Lamoille County Sheriff's Office. Which
in the building, yes.
Right. Okay. So my comments then, I thought that was going to be the answer. My comments, one is regarding Jen's shop and one's regarding Barb's shop. And I want to preface that by saying, by no means am I attempting to speak on behalf of either of them. But my comment is that I think that this proposal sort of goes in the exact opposite direction from what DPS has said in the past of where they wanted to go, that being to be responsible for less dispatching of local fire and EMS, not more. And with regard to Barb's shop, it goes against Barb's or the E911 board stated desire for, I think Barb referred to it as agency diversity in terms of the ownership of the PSAPs. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't go forward, just commenting or making note of the fact that this would be a major change of direction for both of those agencies.
Understood. And there are several different governance options that are provided in the section immediately after this.
Yeah.
That while they don't talk to those facts, they do present multiple ways of making this a reality, multiple ways of representation and management and so on and so forth. So there are some options there as well. And again, there are options. So it's not
and then again,
nothing's written in stone.
And your job as consultants is not to make Jen Morrison or Barb Neal happy.
Right.
Your job is to tell us what the best opportunities are, how you see it happening in other parts of the country. And there's going to be change, and with change, there's pain. So whether that's mine or Barb's or local agencies or whomever, there will definitely be growing pains associated with moves in this direction. So, okay, in the interest of time, guys, I really want to focus us on this next section here, which is, I mean, we're obviously going to have time to react to that new section that we previously were looking at. Ron, go ahead.
They pick me, but I thought that would be, a bit over the top. So I looked at the three recommendations. I will immediately dismiss the option of moving to a statewide P25 700 megahertz system. That the long-term cost of ownership for the individual agencies is astronomical. My agency is actually part of the Clinton County, New York mutual aid system, which actually has a 700 megahertz P25 trunking system. And what it's resulted in is each department has like 2 portable radios, and it is cumbersome for the way our departments do business. And then to go back toward the center here, a long time ago when I was on the VCOM steering committee, we decided that the cost of P25 subscriber units was not within the budgetary capabilities of individual departments. It is problematic. Even if you got a grant and you bought all this stuff for the agencies now, what would happen is that there'd be attrition, and if a department got 15 radios now, then by 10 or 15 years ago from now, as they started to die, they would be down to 2 or 3 radios. The suggestion to my firefighters that they carry around those giant unification P25 pagers, I already have troubles getting them to carry compact pagers. They try to use their phones and things like that. So that's never going to go over. I think that while the law enforcement people have bit the bullet and they've all migrated to P25 subscriber units and infrastructure, the fire, and I can't speak for EMS, but I can speak for the 205 fire departments. And a migration to P25 would be unacceptable. The option there would simply be, countywide or somehow regional analog voting simulcast systems. The other options are really untenable from a long-term financial basis. Okay, I'm going to take my hand down.
Okay, thanks. I think that you're obviously representing what a lot of people's reaction is going to be coming out of the gate on some of these proposals, but it doesn't mean that they aren't the proposals that need to be in the report, because we have to wrestle with the fact that the best solution is extremely expensive, and so it has to be out there for public consideration, for stakeholder consideration, for legislative consideration. So with that being said, you're right. Your voice just represented what we're going to hear quite a bit of in the feedback period, but we have to let people sit with the options. So moving to the numbers, because these numbers do drive cost. And of course, we're trying to get some approximations so that we can use the funding workshop to its fullest potential. I wanted to start on the EMS Advisory Committee, 75 ground ambulance services, and 88 first response agencies. And assumed an average of 3 vehicles per ground services, et cetera, and the number of mobile radios. I don't have any visibility into these estimates. Does anyone on the call feel that these numbers are at least okay for ballparking?
Yes.
Okay, good, because you definitely have viz into this. So, okay, good.
Yeah, and bear in mind, Jen, I did a lot of research on this to come up with these services and everything, and the number of vehicles are estimates that I kind of threw based on
Sure.
just prior experience. So,
Okay. So EMS sounds like it's a good number to work with. So the law enforcement officer one, it does not appear to be accurate to me, and I want to parse this out a little bit. And I guess the first question is, when we talk about full-time officers or deputies, particularly when you're talking about smaller agencies or sheriff's deputies or any place where they have take-home vehicles, their portables go with them all the time. It is not a shared portable situation. In fact, in Burlington, it's not a shared portable. Everybody has a portable issued to them. And so I'm just not convinced that the sharing of portables is a common scheme in Vermont.
I will agree with that.
I would say,
don't think
yeah.
I'm aware of one agency that does that.
Yeah. And so
okay,
that
I can certainly adjust those numbers up.
right. And then
Jen,
they're going to come down in a quick hot minute here, but just
okay.
The other thing is that 799 full-time officers and deputies from 2016 based on VCIC. VCIC is a good measure, but I think the Criminal Justice Council is going to have more accurate current information. So this is where it gets sticky. So when you talk about full-time officers or deputies, that might mean that they work 40 hours a week, but it doesn't cover the whole array of officers out there. So there are level 1, 2, and 3 certified law enforcement officers in Vermont. And many of them, regardless of the level of their authority, which is their certification level, work full or part-time. For instance, there are many who are full-time law enforcement officers by certification, but in retirement are working as a level 1 officer doing court security. So that's the scope of their current work, even though they're, so when you say there's full-time officers, I don't know what that means, because we have a lot of part-time officers and they also have portables issued to them, depending on who they work for. So I'm not comfortable that that number is a real number, and I would be happy to help. And it doesn't have to be done before we release this for public review. Maybe we footnote it and say that, in review of this draft or this working draft, it became clear we need to dig deeper into the number of portables currently in the field for law enforcement, because I really am not, I'm very skeptical of this number.
Yeah, and
then
I don't have a problem at all putting that footnote in there, Jen. I just know that, across the country, one of the biggest challenges that we come up with, even on a county level, when we implement a new radio system for our county and we need to find out what's out there as far as subscriber units, it's a real challenge, even at that level, trying to get an accurate count of what's out there. So it's because each agency's different. So I did the best I can on this, and I'm certainly open to adjusting this however you think it needs to be
100%.
adjusted. Yeah.
This is an us thing. This is I think we might do it differently, and we can help dig into this.
Okay.
When I look at the state numbers, the only conclusion I can come up with is that you have included every single correctional officer in the state, because there are fewer than 450 state law enforcement officers between all the agencies across the state enterprise that have sworn law enforcement officers. I can get the exact number. It's not a
Okay.
problem, but it's less than 450 police officers. Now, it dawned on me when I was, reading this for the third time that it's possible that you're talking about supporting correctional officers who do use portable radios, but I don't know if we ever contemplated them in this work. So it sort of opens a whole new can of worms. And for the purpose of this document, I think we should focus on law enforcement officers,
Yeah, I
not
will
correctional officers.
I will change that to just say, we'll assume a total of 450 law enforcement officers, and then obviously we're not going to have 800 vehicles then.
Right. So you're going to have more than 450 vehicles because you have some who have multiple vehicles assigned to them because they have ancillary duties. For instance, if you're on the um, bomb team, you might have a pickup truck as your special purpose vehicle, but you have a regular cruiser for your day-to-day shift work, right? So it's not going to be straight. I would say like maybe 500 radios is at least close enough to be within a few dozen.
Okay.
So anyway, I think those numbers would be closer, and it doesn't have to be exact, but we can help you get exact if you want it to be closer.
We're looking for ROM numbers here, I think, right? Rough order of magnitude. So,
Yep.
I think as long as we're not way off, that's what we were kind of shooting for here. Just going to give you an estimate of what what you'll be looking at.
Okay. And then Ron, this speaks to the 205 fire departments in Vermont, and that there is no data available. And that you were assuming an average of 15 firefighters per department and an average of 5 apparatus per department, and that it would require 1,025 mobile radios, 3,000 plus portable radios, and 3,000 plus P25 pagers. Does that number sound a good working number?
The number of apparatus seems to average out. I mean, there are a significant number of them that only have 1 or 2. The number of firefighters basically averages out, and
it's not so far off. I mean, I know people are going to say, hey, that's not our circumstance, but is it within the same, realm of possibility that we're not off by more than 200 either way?
The usual estimate is that there are approximately 5,000 volunteer firefighters in the state of Vermont. So
do they all have portables issued to them, or are they assigned to the apparatus that they roll out with?
that depends on the department. A lot of the rural departments issue portables to at least their senior members, because the vast majority of them, I mean, this is Vermont, where our slogan is "You can't get there from here." So it's not always practical for someone to respond to the station when the fire is in the other direction. I would say that average of 15 per department is probably pretty accurate.
Okay. Okay. So that's, I think, Scott, in thinking about this, I don't want to slow down the pushing this out in the public draft. I think making the changes we talked about to the law enforcement numbers, but footnoting that whole section that these numbers are still under revision, and we're happy to help you get to a closer number, but at least we're back in the ballpark.
I will take care of that. Absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, those were the two sections that I was aware there were significant discussions needing to be had before this version goes public. Are there any other, if you have stopped the press's concerns, those need to be transmitted to Televate or directly to MCP by the end of business today? And preferably you've provided whatever feedback, if it's substantive, it doesn't have to be stylistic or anything like that, but presumably task force members will communicate their feedback by tonight in order for MCP to turn this thing around and get it back to us by the close of business Friday, and then for me to get it over to the public records team for redactions. Does that sound good to everyone?
Yes.
Okay. Does anyone else have other items of new business to take up? Oh, Barb, go ahead.
Hi there. Sorry for being late to the party today. I just wanted to add that I did send my feedback directly to Rick and Dom and marked the things of most importance to me in bold. And the rest were sort of just observations along the way. So when Mission
Yes, we
Critical
have
reviews
that.
or when Televate consolidates that, was my thinking on those.
We have that.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other items of new business from task force members? Okay, hearing none, we will move on to the last agenda item, which is to confirm the next meeting date. I believe it's already on the books for 2 weeks from now. Does anyone have any concerns with that? Okay, very good. Then we will, absent the need for a special meeting between now and then, we will confirm the next meeting date as 2 weeks from now, which sounds like it is March 12th. Wow, so hard to believe. March 12th at the usual time, 11:15.
It'll be almost spring by then.
I'm beginning to think it might actually come. So, okay. With that being said, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I will make a motion to adjourn.
That's what I love about you,
Second it.
Ron. Oh, and you too, Jim. All right. We have a motion and we have a second. All those in favor, please raise your hand or say aye.
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 That is unanimous. So with that, Emily, you can stop the recording and we are adjourned. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.